Welcome to Stoked with Megan McPhail, the podcast that helps you get super effing jazzed about your work, life, and bank account. I'm your host, Megan McPhail, a former burnt-out emergency veterinarian that quit my hard-earned career to become a seven-figure business coach, entrepreneur, and elopement photographer. Now I'm living a life I absolutely love, full of travel, adventure, and financial abundance, and I am hell-bent on inspiring others to do the same. Are you ready to say goodbye to the 9-to-5 grind and start going after some big, bold dreams? Then let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, it's your host, Megan McPhail.
And your co-host, Todd Reedy.
And today's episode is for all the wannabe entrepreneurs and small business owners that are still working a shitty 9-to-5 job. These are the 5 signs that you should quit your job as soon as possible. And I'm excited to go through this. I think it's a nice summary of a lot of our other podcast episodes. And I'm going to let Todd start with number 1. What is the first reason you should quit your freaking job?
Number 1 is your job doesn't align with your values.
Yes, 100%. I call this like a death by 1,000 cuts. If you are working a job where little things every day just add up that go against your core values, you need to leave that job. And we should talk about what the core values are. There's a lot of ways to figure them out. I have all my coaching students go through an exercise so they can discover their 10 most important core values. It's the things that bring you happiness, feel like it's part of your purpose. They fill your cup. And there's a ton of different words. I mean, if I had to just think of a few, I'd think of honesty, responsibility, family, strength, organization, faith, discipline, devotion, integrity, intelligence, selflessness. There's just so many. There's hundreds of different words. And when you find them, when you figure them out, you may realize that your current job situation goes against a lot of your core values. And it doesn't mean that it's evil or anything like that. It could just be one of my core values is adventure, and being stuck in a hospital for 15 hours at a time and being burnt out doesn't really allow for any adventure. So not aligning your work with your core values is always going to make you kind of feel like something's wrong. It's going to feel icky and gross. And yeah, I mean, you have to quit your job to get away from that.
And I think it could be because it's a two-edged sword, right? You have your values and then your job's values. So maybe your values have changed since you first started, or maybe your job position has changed, or your company's values have changed in a different direction. So I think both of those are valid reasons why your values don't align with your job's. So I think either one could be a reason to quit.
Yeah. And, my values would include providing the best possible care to an animal. But when we were short-staffed and couldn't do that, then my values were being accosted every day. So it's things like that. And your values really shouldn't change that much over time. It's more just I think a lot of jobs just have a hard time providing people with adequate work conditions, and will kind of do things that favor money instead of honesty or something like that. So a lot of people's values are just not followed in these roles.
And I was thinking that values could change in the sense of my example where I first started doing weapons type work, where that really wasn't a big issue to me. It wasn't a concern. It didn't conflict with my thoughts at the time. But as I've kind of grown up and decided that wasn't as important or something that I wanted to promote, then that's kind of how I was thinking about changing your own values. Maybe not changing values, but maybe you're realigning your priorities.
Yes. Okay. What's number 2?
Number 2 reason you should quit your job is your job drains your energy.
Yes. This is so important, because if something is not pumping you up and jazzing you up and giving you energy, you should not be doing it, is my opinion. As somebody who went from working as a vet where my energy was constantly drained, I spent all my time off recovering and then feeling like shit because I didn't have energy to spend with friends or go to the gym or make meals, if you're job is draining your energy, it's got to go.
Yeah, and I was thinking like how to actually determine that. I'd say like you're just having more bad days than good days.
Yeah.
So like you come home and you make a tally because life's too short to have more bad days than good days.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I just remember the recovery from, I mean, I would have to like just spend 3 days in bed essentially after working for weeks, and after those 3 days, then maybe I wanted to go do something for myself. But yeah, it was just constant recovery mode after my vet shop. I was just so mentally and physically exhausted all the time. So yeah, if your energy is just being drained out of you and your job is just sucking away your soul, then you should quit it. What's the third reason?
The third reason you should quit your job is you are burnt out.
Yes. As someone who has experienced burnout, it's the worst. And I mean, burnout is, we had a whole podcast episode about this, but it's just you're undergoing so much chronic stress that your nervous system is so out of whack. And yeah, I mean, no job should promote burnout or think that burnout is okay. Like, it's so horrible to recover from. It's so much deeper than just being exhausted, Burnout, like, you should have quit your job months ago if you're experiencing burnout in your job. And the only way to really recover from burnout is to not go to that job anymore and rest. So, what else do you have to say about burnout?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, we have a whole episode on it, but some of the, I guess, quick symptoms of burnout I'm thinking are like every day you dread going to work, or you get the Sunday scaries, which I remember having those. Physical symptoms, I know, again, we go through the full list, but yeah, physical symptoms is affecting your physical health or your mental health, or you're actively looking ways to avoid your job.
Yeah.
So like using all your vacation or like using sick days or finding any excuse to get out of work, get out of meetings, get out of tasks.
Yeah. And burnout is even more serious than that. Like, I've heard my colleagues say, like, I want to get into a car accident so I can sit in the hospital and chill for a few days. Like, that's what burnout sounds like. Or I've had friends who were burnt out from their jobs and they were having flare-ups of autoimmune diseases and stomach issues and hair was falling out and stuff like that. So there's like physical symptoms. So yeah, that's why I say, like, you should have quit months ago, and you absolutely have to quit if you were fantasizing about getting hit by a car and losing your hair. Like, burnout is big time. So yeah, and I think in our episode, a lot of it too had to do with like energy and values. So like it kind of just goes along with everything that we talked about before, about how if you're burning out from your job, there's no way to recover from that while actively working that job. You have to leave it. You have to prioritize yourself. You have to work a job that is not going to cause so much trauma in your body, essentially. So what's the next one?
Reason number 4 you should quit your job is your workplace is toxic.
Yeah. Ugh. Toxic workplaces. I've had so many experiences with toxic workplaces. I'm just under the impression at this point that like every animal hospital is a toxic workplace. And I don't know about you. Would you describe your workplaces as toxic?
No, I don't think so. Just not an enjoyable place that I want to spend my time.
Mm-hmm. Even when they're like totally unconcerned during the pandemic that you're going to get COVID or anything.
Yeah, that's a pretty extreme example. But pre-COVID days, yeah, I think it was like kind of supportive, but not great. So maybe not toxic.
Let's explain what a toxic workplace is. So oftentimes there's a lack of communication. I've experienced this from management where they just send out some emails about some really important things and you don't hear it and things go to hell. So like lack of communication. If there's like just a revolving door of people coming in and coming out, that's often a sign of a toxic work environment. No room for growth. Like you can't learn more, you can't achieve more. Like you're basically at the level you're always going to be at, which is kind of goes against like what we enjoy in life. Like we enjoy bettering ourselves. Psychologically, we want to move up, you know,
And grow.
and grow and learn, you know. So if you can't do that, that's pretty toxic. If there are cliques and gossiping and stuff like that, that's toxic. If you have management teams that kind of like gaslight you, and when you bring issues to them and they try to convince you that those issues aren't real, or if you're struggling with something and they try to make it seem like you're the problem, like those are all signs of a toxic workplace. If burnout is just part of the job description, that's a toxic workplace. So there's a lot of signs of a toxic workplace, poor work-life balance, all those kinds of things.
Yeah. And the fifth sign that you should quit your job is you are not becoming the best version of yourself.
I love this reason because I genuinely feel like that is our purpose, is to become the best versions of ourselves. And this is really like a summary of everything else. If you're burning out, if your energy is drained, if you're working a job that goes against your values and doesn't feel like it's your purpose in life, and you feel drawn to something else, but you're staying in your job because of job security or whatever, but you're like recovering and you're not working out and you're irritable and you're just like becoming the worst version of yourself. We've all been in relationships that have brought out the worst in us, right? And like jobs are kind of like relationships where they can do that. And if that is happening to you, you should quit, because you deserve in this one life to be the best version of yourself and see who that is and not be struggling so much. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I'm just envisioning, like, in my instance, that I would come home from work and just be like miserable because of my day of work. And so like that would then like, you know, permeate to friends, family, which is, I mean, we all work and we should enjoy it, but it's taking away from my non-work life. That's definitely not the best version of myself. So if your work is draining you to the point that you're not a good person or becoming better outside of work, then that's not a good thing.
Yeah. Ugh. It just brings me back to my days as a veterinarian and how drastically improved my life is now. I mean, it's not perfect. I still have things I need to work on, but at least I'm not having to deal with my boss and my energy being drained and being burnt out and crying in bathrooms and just that feeling of dread. And even commuting sucks. Like, I just get to wake up and hang out with my dogs. I just remember when we had to go babysit our niece and like driving and like kind of commuting there in the morning, how awful that felt. Ugh, I'm getting all these flashbacks of how horrible it was and being gaslit by management. If you're burnt out and your colleagues are all burnt out and everybody's just kind of like depleted energetically and miserable, I mean, that's just not a situation that's good to be in, especially 40 hours a week until you're like 60 or 70 years old. That's just not worth it. So let's talk about when you quit your job and it's terrifying, but then things start working out and you start your online business and you're a small business owner and an entrepreneur and you get to do something that lights your soul on fire and work doesn't have to feel like work and it's actually like super fun most of the time, although there are some things that you have to do that aren't as fun, but that's just life, you know? Can't all be rainbows and unicorns and stuff like that all the time. But yeah, I mean, I was talking with a photographer who knew me back when I had like just recently quit my vet job. So I was still kind of like recovering and I was still in a bad marriage and I was still in scarcity mindset mode and I kind of hadn't become who I am today. She said she listened to this podcast and she's like, this is not the same person I met back in like 2018 or whenever it was. You are more confident, more self-assured. Your tone of voice is different. You're not as guarded. Like I'm just a completely different person than I've ever been because I quit that soul-sucking job, because I left that shitty relationship, because I prioritized being the best version of myself, because I do work that I love and work with people that I love. And yeah, everything's just great. I still needed to work out more, but I'm working on that. I probably need to drink more water, but I'm working on that, you know? But yeah, I mean, what's the difference in your life comparatively? Because, you know, Todd didn't have as traumatizing as a job as I did, but it was still worth quitting.
Yeah, I was in the spot where every day I dreaded going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And every day I was actively looking for ways to get out of work
Yeah.
or missing meetings or whatever that may look like so I didn't have to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was come home, I'd be grumpy, I'd bitch about work all evening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just wasn't a positive, happy spot in my life. So yeah, I'm in a much better spot and I am a much better version of myself now since quitting my job.
Yeah. Your dad said that, didn't he? He made some comments on.
Yeah, I think you did.
Yeah.
I've heard that from your folks too.
Mm-hmm.
About you.
Oh, yeah. I know my mom is like, you're just so happy now. I love it. I was cranky and mean and miserable before. So those are the top 5 reasons you should quit your job. And I want everybody to be happy. I want everybody to experience being a small business owner and an entrepreneur. You should go back and listen to our podcast on how to quit your job and our discussion on whether everybody can be an entrepreneur or not. We decided that everyone could be, and start kind of like following your energy and, you know, your passion and your purpose, and see what else could be out there for you, because I guarantee you can find something that you feel drawn towards that gives you energy, and there's a way to make money doing it. I guarantee. If I can quit being an emergency veterinarian and make $1.3 million as an elopement photographer and a coach of elopement photographers, you know, which is so freaking random, you can find something out there that you can do too. And for all of the people who have quit their jobs to pursue being a business owner, like, kudos to you. I'm sure you can relate to that drastic change in your life like we can. So talk to you next week. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Stoked with Megan McPhail. If you enjoyed the show and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend. If you're looking for more inspiring content, check us out on Instagram at Stoked with Megan McPhail. And to learn more about my business coaching and how I can personally help you quit your 9-to-5, visit my website at meganmcphail.com. I hope this leaves you feeling stoked. See you next week.